guys, welcome to Wickedly Judged, the podcast dedicated to exposing wrongful convictions and fighting for justice reform in America. I'm Rebecca, your host, and if you're new here, this show is for anyone who believes that justice isn't just a verdict. It's a promise, a process, and far too often, a fight. Here at Wickedly Judged, we shine a light on the cracks in our justice system by sharing the real stories, true life of those who have been wrongfully accused, convicted, and forgotten by the courts. We give a voice to their families, advocates, and survivors who refuse to accept injustice as the end of their story. Before we dive in, a quick thank you to our sponsors, Veteran Alliance, Yarn Therapy for Me, Justin Apron, Liberty First Radio, NDVLB, Prime Ledger Group, JSIL, and Wickedly Judged Justice Activation Project. And a special thanks to JP Verse of Versefire Records, providing our powerful intro and outro music. Your guys' support fuels our mission. Thank you so much for standing with us in the fight to expose wrongful convictions and demanding true justice in America. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Wickedly Judged. Today, I will be doing an interview with David Beers. He is the private investigator on Pete Wlasiuk's case. If you don't know anything about it, let me give you a brief description of it. This was a crime that happened in the 90s. He's been incarcerated for over 3 decades. It was actually on a couple of the true crime shows that you watch on TV. Dave is going to do an interview with me today and kind of just break down the case for us. Thank you very much for joining us today, David.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So let's get started. How did you first become involved in Pete's case, and what initially caught your attention?
Yeah, well, the case actually happened in April of 2002. So I was not involved at the time. But he was arrested just a few days after it happened. And later he went to trial, I think in November of 2002, and he was convicted of murder of his wife. And then that case was sent back on appeal, and he was granted a second trial in 2007. And at that time, he was assigned a new attorney. And that attorney I had worked with in the past on a few cases, and he called me and asked me if I would help him with the case as it moved forward to a second trial. So that's when I first got involved. So unfortunately, my involvement, if it had happened sooner, we might have had a different outcome. I don't know, because there was some kind of bad things that happened that led up to the first trial. But anyway, I got involved in 2007 when he was assigned a new attorney.
And you've been involved in the case ever since?
Yes. Actually, he went to trial a second time in the same small town, and he was convicted again. And then that case, too, was also overturned. It was sent back for a third trial in 2012. And once again, he was assigned another new attorney. But he wanted me to stay on board because of my knowledge of the case. So I continued working with him in preparing for the third trial in the same town. But unfortunately, he was convicted a third time, and he was sentenced to state prison.
At what point did you realize this case might not be what it appeared to be?
Well, I recognized it almost immediately. I saw problems with the case right up front. That's why his second attorney called me. He said, "We got some problems here, and I want you to take a look at it." So once I started reviewing the discovery material, there was a lot of things that really jumped out at me, that things that had gone wrong, things that the police did that they shouldn't have done, or could have done better. And I identified a lot of major issues in the case. And when we tried to address those as best we could in the second trial, but despite our best efforts, he was convicted again.
One of the most significant issues in this case involved the jury. What did your investigation uncover about the deliberation?
Yeah, that was interesting. After the second trial, we made contact with a couple of the jurors and found out that during their deliberations, they were reviewing a piece of evidence they misinterpreted, and it wasn't explained to them during the trial. And but once we explained it to them, they said that if they had known what the explanation was, they wouldn't have convicted him. As a result of that, we ended up taking a couple of statements from those jurors. Unfortunately, both of those jurors have since passed away. But they gave us a sworn affidavit that had they known the facts of that document, they would not have voted to convict.
Wow. Can you explain what happened with the reference to Patty's diary and why it became so important in this case?
Well, Patty's diary became a problem. That was one of the reasons the first case got overturned on appeal, because her diaries were misinterpreted, for one thing, and they weren't allowed to be used in the trial because they were considered hearsay, because there was nobody to question as to what they truly meant. And that was the reason that the appellate division overturned his first trial, because the district attorney put in those diaries, and the judge allowed it. And that was the main reason it was overturned by appeal, because they weren't allowed.
That's crazy. What did jurors later tell you about how that information, going back to Patty's diary, influenced their verdict?
Actually, I was not involved in talking to jurors of the first trial, and I don't know if any of them were ever talked to, but I did not. So, like I said, my involvement didn't happen until the second trial.
How unusual in your career, how unusual is it to have jurors come forward and explain exactly why they changed their votes?
Yeah, that's pretty unusual. I have had it happen rarely, but I thought it was rather unique in this case that they based their decision primarily to convict him based on that one document. That there should have been some, what we call, instructions by the judge as to how they could use that, limiting instructions, they call it. But unfortunately, they were allowed to review that piece of evidence. It was in evidence, but when they reviewed it during deliberations, they misinterpreted it. They thought the document had been prepared by the state police lab, when in fact it was submitted by the lead investigator in Peter's case with the sheriff's department, and he had a very negative narrative in that document that the state police never would have put in there.
Imagine that. Corruption at its finest. Oh, so who was Dr. James Lentini, and why did his role during deliberations become such a concern?
Yeah, Dr. Lentini, a couple problems with him. First of all, he probably shouldn't have been placed on the jury anyway, because he had Peter's wife, Patty, at the time, was a patient of his, had been a patient of his. he had treated her. So that was kind of a conflict in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then during deliberations, during the second trial, Dr. Lentini was the one that discovered that document and pointed it out to the other jurors. It just became very suspicious as to how he zeroed in on that one page out of that multi-page document that was put into evidence.
Very convenient.
Yeah.
What did the jurors report about his influence in the jury room?
Actually, they did not. They just said that it had come to their attention. They didn't say who brought it to their attention.
Okay.
And we didn't focus on that. Our focus was based on, in reviewing the document, they said that when we explained to them that the document wasn't written by the New York State Police lab, but rather the lead investigator, that changed everything in their mind. And they said if they had known that, they would have acquitted him.
So why is it so problematic when a juror introduces personal expertise that was never tested in court?
What are you referring to?
Dr. Lentini.
Well, he didn't offer any professional expert as a doctor. He just somehow he zeroed in on that one page in that multi-page evidence document.
Okay.
And he presented that to the rest of the jury, and whether it was his sole opinion or they all agreed with him, that it appeared to them that it had been prepared by the state police lab.
As you investigated this case and you looked deeper into the forensic evidence, what was the biggest problems you found?
Well, one of the major problems was Patty's autopsy. The medical examiner, his name was Dr. James Terzian. He initially ruled that her death was probable drowning pending toxicology. And the only toxicology that came back was she'd been drinking, but her blood alcohol wasn't real high. It was like only like 0.04%. So she was impaired, but legally intoxicated. But she did have a history of several DWIs. In fact, that was one of the reasons that Peter got himself in trouble by trying to protect her because of her past. So he lied to the police about what happened that night, and that kind of backfired on him later. But anyway, back to the autopsy. So he had ruled that the death was from probable drowning, and everything seemed to be consistent with that. But then later, the police discovered something they thought was crucial in their case, because during her autopsy, they didn't know the significance at the time, but during her autopsy, there was these little burdocks in her hair.
Mm-hmm.
They're little spheres that grow on plants, and they stick to just about anything. In fact, they were the inspiration for what we now call Velcro. And there was some on her hair, a couple on her clothing. The police claimed that there was no burdocks at the scene where the truck went in the water, but there was, because when I went up there years later when I got involved, and I went to the scene, of course, and what do I see growing right where the truck went in is brand new burdocks. But they said there wasn't any there at the time. They even had a professor from Binghamton University come up, and he was not a botanist, he was a biologist. But he looked at the scene, and he identified some of the foliage that was there, but he said none of it was burdocks. But yet there was these scattered branches right on the shoreline that you can see in the photographs, right where the truck went in. Which if they had been examined, I think they would have found out that they were in fact burdock branches.
Wow.
But they never did that. Instead, they went up to Peter's house, did a search warrant, and when they were searching the property outside, there was burdock bushes growing all over the property. I think they identified like 9 different locations. But one location in particular was probably about 60 feet behind the house. They had a above ground swimming pool. And right behind the swimming pool, there was this, we call it the murder bush, because they said that that's where the assault took place. There was one broken branch, which really didn't mean anything because the other burdock bushes had broken branches as well. And the snow had just melted off these things. So, but anyway, they in this one burdock bush, they found a couple of hairs. They claimed there was a couple of hairs stuck to the branch, and they took photographs of it, several close-up photographs. So in the photographs, you can see at least two hairs, maybe three at the most. So they sent the hairs to the lab to see if they were Patty's, and they were. But what was interesting about that was that when we got the lab report back along with their notes, they counted 18 hairs. Where did they come from? Well, we know where they came from, but we tried to present that to the jury, and we did. But there's really only one way that could have happened, and that is they pulled hair from Patty's scalp and included that in the hairs that they found, if they even found those up there.
Right.
And that's where the other hairs came from. And there was a lot of other things like that. But anyway, based on this whole burdock scenario, when it was presented to Dr. Terzian, he decided he wanted to take another look at the body. So the body went back for what they call the second autopsy. Now keep in mind, she'd already been autopsied once, and then she went to organ donation unit, and then they harvested some of her organs, and then there was a funeral. So after the funeral, she was supposed to be cremated, but for some reason it got delayed. So her body was still available. So they took her back to Dr. Terzian, and he did a so-called second autopsy. But he found no medical evidence to suggest that anything other than a drowning happened, with the exception of the burdocks in her hair. So based solely on a burdock in her hair, and allegedly none at the scene, he changed his mind, and he called it a homicide by asphyxiation.
So would you say that the most misunderstood forensic evidence in this case is the burdock?
The whole case was these little burdocks. They could have come from anywhere, but I'm convinced they were right there at the shoreline before, when the truck went in. And when that truck hit those branches, they went flying everywhere, and they're floating out in the water, and they cling to anything that's porous,
Right.
hair, clothing, and in fact, even the diver that went down and recovered Patty's body, he had a burdock on his dive suit. But yet they claim
there's none in the area.
There's no burdocks anywhere in the area. They said they searched around the entire lake. No, they didn't, because I did, and we later brought down our own expert botanist from Cornell University, and we took him around and showed him, and we identified numerous locations all around the lake where there was burdocks growing everywhere. That was the crux of their case, was this silly burdock.
That is crazy. And because of that, an innocent man sits behind bars.
Yeah.
Decades.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. So let me ask you this. Looking back over your entire investigation over the years, what discovery has had the greatest impact on your opinion of the case?
The greatest discovery? There's multiple issues. Multiple issues. There was problems with the hair. There was problems with her coat. There was problems with items that they found at the scene. A pair of gloves, some boots. There are just so many different issues. Yeah, like for example, when they're examining the scene there, after they pulled the truck out of the water, First of all, they pulled it out prematurely. That's another story. But they found a pair of kind of like sneakers on the shoreline, and they had burdocks on them. So they claimed that they were Peter's, and that he got them on his sneakers up at the house when he was strangling her in the murder bush. But when they inventoried the truck, there was a pair of boots in the truck, which were actually Peter's, and the sneakers that they found on the shoreline were not Peter's. But I'm quite certain I know whose they were, because when it first happened, Peter, he was soaking wet. He'd just come out of the lake after he lost grip of Patty, and he's knocking on doors trying to find help. It's off season, so there aren't too many people living there. But he finally gets somebody to answer their door. This is late at night, 12:30 or so, 1 o'clock. So finally somebody answers the door, and he's basically screaming at him, "Call 911." He's kind of hysterical. So they call 911. So while they're waiting for the ambulance and police to get there, the guy that called 911, he goes over and gets a boat, and he puts on his diving suit, and of course he had swim fins. So he comes over to the shoreline, and so in order to put on his swim fins, he had to take off his sneakers.
Okay.
So he puts his dive suit on. It wasn't a real dive suit, but it was a rubber suit, and he put his swim fins on, and he goes in the water. You could actually see the truck. It was about 60 feet out from the shoreline, but the lights were still on. So you could still see the lights through the water. And the water was about 12 feet deep. So he goes out there, and he enters the water over the truck, and he goes down and just barely touches the top of the truck. And the water was so cold, we're talking probably 36, 37 degrees. That's like your refrigerator.
Right.
So he couldn't take the cold anymore. So he came back up. He got in the boat, came to the shoreline, and he just ran home and jumped in the tub to warm up. So the sneakers were staying right there on the shoreline. So that was one thing. And the other thing was the gloves were right there too on the shoreline, and they too had burdocks on them. Where'd they come from? So they claimed that they were Peter's. No, they were not Peter's.
Did they not do any DNA testing or anything on the gloves? Because most gloves you can get skin cells on the inside.
They didn't do DNA on the boots in the truck, or the sneakers on the shoreline, and no DNA on the gloves. But my question was, okay, if they're not Peter's gloves, whose are they? But then I can't say this conclusively, but it makes sense. So there was a tow truck operator there that they had hired to pull the truck out. And in order to do that, they had to send this winch all the way down from the top of the road all the way down to the shoreline. And then they had the diver go back in the water with this connection. And they showed him how to connect it to the back of the truck. But when the diver's in there, he's having trouble with it. He can't get it hooked up. So he comes back out, and he says, "Hey, I need some help with this. How does this work?" So the tow truck driver, I'm sure this is what happened. So he had to help him with this mechanism. So he takes his gloves off, and he just sits them there on the shoreline. And then he hands the mechanism back to the diver, and he goes back in and does this thing, and they pull the truck out, and the gloves get left there on the shoreline.
That is crazy. Just simple pieces of evidence that a simple DNA test would have proved that they weren't his.
Yeah,
it didn't belong to Pete.
Yeah, and the other thing, there's just one thing after another here. It's not just one little issue; it's multiple issues. So we talk about Patty's coat. She was a nurse, so she was wearing her at work. But like I said, this was early April. She was wearing a coat, a brown coat on it, had kind of quilted lining inside, but it wasn't. She didn't zip it up. So when this accident happened, she was behind the wheel. She was the one driving, and now that the truck is sinking, she's panicking behind the wheel. Peter can't get out his door, but the driver's window is down about a third of the way. So Peter climbs over her and out the window, and then grabs her by the coat collar to try to pull her out. But at the same time, the water's starting to rush in, and her coat turns inside out and pulls right out over the top of her head. And as a result, he loses grip on her. All he had was the coat. So now it's a matter of saving himself, because the truck is sinking, the water's rushing in. He just lost grip on her. So it's dark, it's cold, and there's very little lighting. So somehow he managed to find his way to shore. So anyway, Patty's coat was left on the bottom of the lake. But what's interesting is when the diver went back in, he saw the coat there. And he picked it up, make sure there was no other bodies, and there was nothing there, so he just left it there. But when he comes back out, he tells a couple of the deputies that were standing there that the coat's in there. I don't know why they didn't have him bring it out. That never made sense to me. But anyway, then, well, let's see. This happened on the 2nd. 5 days later. Now, this is after they learned all about the burdocks and the change of the autopsy information. Yeah, so I think it was April 7th, I am quite sure. They go back to the lake now with another diver, and they send him in to not to recover the coat. He claims he didn't know anything about the coat, which I know better. So he goes back in. And while he's in there, he's taking some pictures of the bottom of the lake, and what it looks like. And they're a little blurry, which is understandable. And he also takes a picture of the shoreline from in the lake. So there's probably 8 or 10 pictures. And one of the pictures was the coat, this coat laying on the bottom. And you can make it out pretty well. It's turned inside out. You can see the quilted lining. You can see the zipper. So he picks up the coat and brings it out. They bring it up on the shoreline, and they hang it on this post, and it's got burdocks on it. And they reach into her pocket. She's got 2 pockets in the coat. They reach in one of the pockets, and the only thing they said was in there was her driver's license. But what was strange about that, they recover the coat. I should back up a little bit. In the photograph that they took of the coat, you can see what appears to be. I'm almost certain that if you look at the photos, I think you would agree. There appears to be 2 stones lying on top of the coat. So I asked myself, how does that happen? If the coat is on the bottom lake, how do the stones get on top of the coat?
Right, unless somebody put them there. Exactly.
So here's what I believe happened. So when they find the coat, they take it up to their station and they go through everything. Now they claim that all they found was her driver's license. It didn't make any sense to me. Why would she just have her driver's license in her coat pocket? But what's interesting, they actually sent the coat up to the lab. So when the coat comes back, when the lab finishes their exam, when the coat comes back, it comes back with 2 envelopes, big envelopes. One of them is marked left pocket, one of them is marked right pocket. And there's all kinds of items in there, all kinds of stuff, mostly related to her work as a nurse. But there was money in there. There was some a lighter, all kinds of stuff.
But wait, I thought all the divers found when they recovered the coat was a driver's license. So
Exactly.
Where did all the other stuff come from?
It was there the whole time.
Ah, they just chose not to do anything about it. Okay.
Yeah. And we didn't even learn about this until we actually went up there to do an evidence review. So they pull out the code, and along with the code, there's these two envelopes. What are these? So
That's crazy.
and it says right on there, it had the lab address on it, and it came right from the lab. And we took photographs of that. And so I think what happened, they were so desperate to claim that Peter had done this. They turned a tragic accident into a murder. So what they did, they emptied out everything out of her pockets. This was part of their plan. They took everything out, but they wanted to leave something in the pocket that would identify it as her coat. What better piece of evidence than her driver's license?
Yeah.
So they stick that in the pocket. They go tiptoeing back down to the lake, but the coat's dry now. It's not going to sink very well. So they wrap a couple stones in it, and they toss it out in the approximate area of where it was found. And then they bring the diver in, and he goes down and finds it.
So they botched an investigation from the get-go, something that should have been a simple traffic accident with a unfortunate loss of life. They turned it into a homicide in their minds and on paper, and then they come up with all this evidence after the fact to pin it on Pete to make sure that it sticks.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, this is one of the worst wrongful conviction cases I've worked on in a long time. That's why I'm still involved. I mean, I've been trying to bring justice for Peter for a long time.
So let me ask you this. If the jury in Pete's case had heard everything that you know today, including all the issues in the diary reference, the juror interviews, the concerns about the deliberations, the code, the mishandled evidence, the fabricated evidence, the burdock, do you honestly think that they would convict Pete of murder beyond a reasonable doubt?
No, if that information could be brought out legally through the court process, then no. But there's legal constraints that prevent you from introducing certain types of evidence.
Don't I know that?
Yeah. So that was the problem. They were hell bent on convicting him, and the lead investigator had a prior beef with Peter, so he had kind of a conflict anyway.
So he should have been removed from the case from the get-go.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Remember I keep thinking of these things. Remember the hair evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So when we found the notes from the lab that said there was 18 hairs. So when he was questioned about the hairs that were found on the so-called murder bush, we were asking, how many hairs did you find? 2. Why they just dismiss that or what? But the lab report was in evidence.
So they found 2 and the lab report said 18.
Yeah.
That's not missing a hair or 2. That's a whole chunk of hair.
Yeah. Oh, and it gets worse if it can.
Yeah, if it can.
So anyway, they pulled the truck out that same morning. It was still dark out. So the thing you have to keep in mind is that when that truck went in the water, now this is a pickup truck, and so when that truck is sinking, the water's gushing in not only to the interior but into the bed of the truck, and the same force of water happens when they pull it out, when it's flushing out of the bed of the truck. Okay. So they pull the truck out and they tow it down to a garage, and they're examining it there. And they take an inventory, but they don't really find anything. Taking measurements and that type of thing, taking pictures of it, with the open window, and that was good work. But then I can't remember how much later it was, but they bring down for whatever reason, they bring down a forensic unit from another sheriff's department to examine the truck. This was like 3 weeks later. And what did they find? 2 hairs in the back of the pickup truck.
Oh, come on.
And they claimed that they were stuck in the burrs of the liner.
Oh, come on.
That's the truth. And guess who those hairs came back to?
Patty.
Yeah.
Mhm. That's crazy. Oh my, that's not even remotely believable. I mean, honestly, rushing water coming in, rushing water coming out, and you're going to find 2 hairs after, weeks later that nobody else found. Then miraculously, these 2 hairs. Oh, come on. Oh, why do they keep getting away with this stuff? It is beyond my comprehension.
Yeah.
They don't understand that innocent people's lives are being totally ruined. And all they have to say is, we made a mistake.
Oh no. They don't admit mistakes.
Oh, no, that's why there's so many wrongfully convicted people still in prison after decades and decades.
Yeah. Yeah, this isn't the first one I've worked on.
That's crazy.
I've actually written a couple of books about wrongful convictions.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Go ahead and shout them out here. I'll definitely be adding them to my library.
Yeah. I worked on this one case as a pretty high profile murder case. It happened the day after 9/11.
Oh, wow.
This woman went missing and her husband was the immediate suspect. It's a long story, but anyway, in his case, he went through 4 trials. He was convicted once. The judge threw it out when new evidence was discovered. He was retried again and convicted again. And that one also was overturned. And then, fortunately, in his case, after the second one was overturned, he was granted a change of venue, which was helpful. But then when he went on trial the third time, it was a mistrial. The jury couldn't reach a verdict. So he went on trial a 4th time. And it was a rather kind of a ballsy decision, but he opted for a bench trial.
Oh,
Just the judge. And he was acquitted. So I had worked on the case the whole time, like 15 years. So when it was finally over, I called up our client and told him I was interested in writing a story. And he said, "You should." So I did. It's called Reign of Injustice, the Cal Harris story. It's on Amazon.
okay.
And the other one happened in 2010, between Christmas and New Year's, 2010, 2011, in the city of Binghamton. This young mother, 21 years old, it's 4 children, all under the age of 5. She was arrested and convicted of murdering her 2-year-old son. Spent 5.5 years in state prison. Then we got the appellate court decision. It was so bad that they threw out her convictions entirely. They didn't grant a new trial. They threw it out entirely. She was set free. It was bizarre. And the sad thing about it, the actual killer, her boyfriend, was granted immunity to testify against her. It's called Immunity for Murder, the Veronica Taft story. And I'm working on a 3rd one, but no spoilers.
Yeah, you'll have to let me know when that one comes too, because I'll be adding it to my library as well.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm in the process of writing one right now about my husband's case. And it's when you read through court documents and you go, how in the world? What were these people thinking?
I know.
Like, anybody with half a brain can see what's going on. So why didn't the jury? So, and then as over the years, because he's been in prison almost 21 years. July of this year will be 21 years. So, when I keep reading through all these court documents, I'm like, I just, yeah. The corruption is mind blowing.
Yeah, there's awful lot of it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, David.
And jurors, they, I think they see the defendant sitting there, and they're already thinking guilty. The police arrest you, must be guilty. So that's what you have to overcome. It's hard.
The police arrest you, must be guilty. You're sitting in court, so they must have a very good case against you, or they would never bring it to trial. And then after they get the conviction, well, the court convicted you, so you must be guilty. Why do you keep saying that you're not?
Yeah.
Just accept it. You're guilty. And it's like, no, what happens is the police made a mistake during their investigation. They either screwed up critical evidence or no evidence existed.
Yeah.
And they fabricated it. The prosecutor tells a great story based on a very tunnel vision filled narrative.
Yeah.
And it just turns out that he's the better storyteller because the jury is so enthralled with what story this prosecutor is telling. They never really pay attention to the defense because, well, he's sitting there at the defense table. He's guilty.
Yeah.
And that's the mindset. And the thing that boggles me is you have to go to law school to become a lawyer. You have to go to law school and pass the bar and join their little membership club, the Bar Association, to stand up in court and either prosecute, defend, or judge. That's the requirements.
Yeah.
But you can sit on a jury and determine whether someone lives or dies with no training whatsoever.
Yeah.
That boggles the mind how that is okay.
Yeah.
So
that's our system.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be overhauled.
The prosecutors, their job is to demonize these people, and my job is to try to humanize them.
Mine too. That's why I do what I do, because the stories need to be told. People need to hear it. This is real. There are really people sitting in prison that are actually innocent.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
And the stories need to get out there because that's the only way the mindset of the public is going to change, that the courts are not right all the time. In fact, a lot of the time they're wrong, and they just refuse to change their mistakes.
Yeah.
And look, he's been 25 years that he's been down?
Yeah.
For what? Because of a tragic car accident?
That's what it was.
That's insane.
Yeah. It almost happened to me. I don't know if you know my story. But yeah, when I worked for the state police, I was falsely accused of a number of different things. It was nuts, but I ended up losing my job. But I was actually indicted 2 different times, and I went to trial both times, and I was exonerated. Fortunately, I had a couple of good attorneys. So that's why I do what I do today.
Yeah. And we appreciate what you do to help the people that have been wrongfully convicted. It takes a certain kind of person to be able to stand by multiple years and fight for somebody.
Yeah. So that's why when I started my business, because I was a police officer and then a defendant and then a private investigator, it gave me a new perspective of the system. So that's what I call my business, New Perspective Investigations.
That's awesome. So if anybody in New York is looking for a private investigator, look up Dave. He's a great guy.
I don't know how much longer I'm going to be doing it, but I like what I do. And as long as I stay healthy, I'll keep doing it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to go over the case of Pete and Patty. Unfortunately, it's definitely an eye-opener because, like I said, I remember watching the case on true crime shows, and it blew my mind even back then. Like, are these people stupid? Like, nothing added up to me way back when. So,
yeah.
But yeah, we definitely appreciate you doing this interview with me.
Yeah, after you read my 2 books, if you want to bring me back to talk about them, I will.
Absolutely. I will do that. Absolutely. That sounds great. Well, thank you very much, and you have a wonderful day.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Don't let these stories end just because this episode is over. If you believe in the work that we're doing, here's how you can help us right now. Follow Wickedly Judged wherever you listen to podcasts. Share this episode with someone who cares about truth, and accountability. Follow us on social media. Leave a review. It's one of the fastest ways to help more people find these cases. If you happen to share a post on social media, tag us so we can thank you and amplify the conversation. And if you're able to support the mission directly, please donate to help fuel our investigations, advocacy, and education efforts. Or support the work by grabbing merchandise at wickedlyjudged.com. Every share, review, donation, and purchase helps us keep pushing for real justice reform. As always, stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay hopeful, because nobody deserves to be wickedly judged.